Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines. I have on the show State Senator Dan Claitor. He's for District 16, about 100,000 folks. Dan is going to talk to us about his first stint as a state legislator and what the process is like. He's on several committees, and he's going to describe the process of putting a bill all the way to becoming a law. So join us on the next Legal Lines with State Senator Dan Claitor. Welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm pleased to have on the show today Dan Claitor. He's a Louisiana State Senator for District 16, about 100,000 folks. Dan, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Last time we were doing this, you were running for the State Senate. You've obviously won. Tell the folks what it's been like.
It's been great. It's a real experience where it's a representative government. You get down there and there are folks from every walk of life.
Got to fight, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And everybody pulling in the same direction for the most part.
And you were elected by 66% of the voters, which is great. Pretty much gives you a good, strong mandate. Interesting process, though, I guess, getting plugged into the kind of the wheels of the way the state government works. As I understand it, you're on, what, 5 different committees?
I am. 2 of them are interim, 3 of them are permanent, and the interims may turn into permanent. I'm on local and municipal, which is just what it says it is. I'm on retirement, and that's the state employees, and that's an important function that's often ignored as far as a huge part of our budget.
How much? Millions and millions?
Billions.
Billions, really?
Billions. We have a huge obligation to our retirees that we have to keep in mind. And then I'm on Judiciary A, which deals with the civil law, and I'm interim.
As compared to criminal and then I guess everything else?
Correct.
Okay.
Judiciary C is the criminal law. Judiciary B is municipal type matters and a lot of the gambling information.
And so the other committees are what?
Senate Finance, that's interim, and then
that's a big one too. I guess you're involved in the financial allocations of the budget.
I am. As an interim member, I'm not able to vote, but what happens is frequently some of the other legislators aren't able to attend, and so I'm essentially their proxy, and I can vote under that condition.
Excellent.
And then I'm also on Senate Governmental Affairs, which is, as an interim member, which is going to be a very big thing when it comes about to the census and how we draw the lines for the new districts.
That's a big deal.
Big deal.
And I want to go into basically how the state government works. As I understand it, there are, 17 committees? Is that right?
We have 17 committees on the Senate side, and there are 39 senators across the rotunda. On the other side, we have the representatives. We have 105 of those guys. And so we tease one another in the different houses in that they're kind of a ruckus group, and we like to consider ourselves a little bit more refined, but it's more just a joke than anything
and the
else.
bottom line is, let's explain to the folks. The way the government works is we have the governor, who currently is Governor Jindal, and then you have the legislature, which is made up of the Senate, of which you are one of 39. And then we have the House of Representatives, which is, I think you said 105?
Correct.
And their districts are smaller than your districts. You
Correct.
represent District 16, and within your district you have how many state representatives?
I have contact with 5 state representatives.
And the way it's supposed to work is each of those representatives are dealing with a smaller group of folks that they represent, and you've got 5 of those, and then they coordinate their efforts with you because their districts fall within your district.
Sometimes we're coordinated, sometimes we're not. But for the most time, we're on the same page.
And explain how that works, because I mean, I assume they come to you because they represent a certain group of folks that you've got to have a bigger picture, I guess.
Sure, absolutely. And as you well are aware, the financial bills start in the House. The Senate just has a chance to opportunity and amend them. So we do work together on a lot of bills, and they'll introduce a piece of legislation, and then I'll handle it for them on the Senate side, and that they're not able to take the mic on the Senate side and discuss it. But a bill is introduced, and let's just say in this last session, it was a fiscal session, so you could only introduce 4 non-fiscal bills. You could introduce unlimited fiscal bills, but 4 non-fiscal.
And explain the distinction real quick for the folks. Fiscal versus what?
Well,
non-fiscal, I guess.
Right, sure. For example,
and fiscal meaning dealing with money.
Right, in the budget, or some sort of way dealing with money. I was elected on April 4th. You have to allow 10 days for the matter to be contested, if not. So April 14th, I was sworn in. April 15th, all my bills were due. But I was able to file the 4 bills that I thought would be good and appropriate for that.
And you said they were non-fiscal issues?
Correct.
Okay, and what were those issues?
Well, one was about discipline within the classroom, where when you and I were kids, we were talking about it earlier, if we acted up, Mr. Carrier brought us in the office.
That big wooden paddle?
And it was
There's
all
holes in it?
Well, I never saw it, but I heard you might have.
Unfortunately, I saw it. Felt it.
And now there's been so much confusion on what teachers can and can't do and involvement of the parents. This bill was to allow the teachers to handle discipline a little bit better and to get the parental involvement. And there's actually some teeth in the bill where you would actually have some fines involved on the guardian or the parent if they're not going to participate in the process, and that it's incredibly difficult for teachers to maintain discipline without some help.
Yeah, one kid
from
can
home.
screw up the whole education experience for the other ones.
Absolutely. I had another bill.
And that was signed by the governor.
It was.
So it was a bill that an issue that you, I guess, was brought to your attention or that you felt strongly about?
Correct. And matter of fact, I worked on that bill with the governor's office. The governor's office got in touch with me. We agreed that this was something that was important to both of us. And I worked with his staff worked with my staff, and ultimately we had a lot of input from teacher unions and other folks out there, individual teachers. You go to committee with it, and once it's in committee, education hears it, and then they either amend it or not, and then it gets sent over to the other side, be in the House, over on the House side. I represented it before the committee. The committee had questions. They might want to make amendments. And then where you were talking about that relationship with the representatives, one of the representatives brought it to the floor for me. There on the floor it passed, and then ultimately the governor signed it.
That's a lot of steps.
It's a lot of steps.
I'd really like to take that a little bit slower. So first of all, the governor and your staff worked together. They came up with the idea, the concept, and then y'all got to draft the language.
Correct.
And who does that?
Well, in this particular instance, the governor's office had drafted practically all of the language. But we have a fellow, Jerry Guillotte, over at the Senate that is a lawyer of long time, and he's very well qualified, and he has a staff of lawyers that work below him. So you and I as lawyers, frankly, we could probably do a pretty good job of drafting the bills, but it's not all lawyers in the legislature, so they go to Jerry Guillotte or one of the other staff members and say, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, and they don't talk about the words and where the commas go and everything. Yeah. This is what I want to do, and the staff frames it up in such a way, and then you review it and you sign off on it.
And so then you receive that document after they drafted it according to y'all's broad instructions, and then that document is sent to every senator or every House person, or just to the committee members?
Well, I made a couple of suggestions to what the governor's office had based on my discussions with various educators. Right, and mostly educators that are my constituents. And then once those nuances were made, then we send it to committee, and there at committee, people come up, testify, much like this, just a question and answer session.
And I guess it's that. How are folks notified of the committee is contemplating this issue? Anybody got interest? Come.
Well, the perfect question. We have a great website that you just Google Louisiana Senate. I can't remember the address, but it has every bill that's coming up. You can watch it on the web.
So that's what you go to. All right, well, let's continue this discussion on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith, the Dan Claitor, State Senator, Louisiana. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, pleased to have on the show today Dan Claitor. Dan is a Louisiana State Senator for District 16. Dan, we were talking about the process of how you bill, in this case that dealt with removing unruly kids from the classroom, how it worked through the whole governmental process.
Correct.
And you said initially governor's office and your staff work together. You make some few changes. You bring it over to a fellow in the Senate who kind of comes up with the language of the bill.
Correct.
Then it's presented to the committee members.
Correct.
In this case, the committee was
Education.
Education, okay. And then we were talking about how are folks notified that if they have an issue with this bill to come ask you guys questions.
Right. And the legislative website is one of the places it happens, but as you would guess, one of the other folks that follow it are lobbyists. The lobbyists are down there all the time, and that's their job, and they follow this information. And so they do a very fine job of tracking the pre-filed bills. And there's a misconception about lobbyists in that people say lobbyists are bad
Yeah, I mean,
people.
you hear the word and there's just a negative connotation. So explain to the folks the role they play.
Lobbyists are, in a sense, the lawyers of the courtroom, how you and I make presentations to the judge, and the judge makes a decision. If we would ever be so silly as to misrepresent something to the judge, we would never be able to go in his courtroom again. The lobbyists have sort of the same deal, in that they make representations to the legislators and the committees about their positions and the effects that it'll have on them. And so they're a great source of information. Now, they're not the only source of information, and they have lobbyists on all the different sides of the issue.
That's a great analogy, though, because you have the plaintiff and the defendant and the judge, and each attorney is representing their client's interests. You guys, in this case, are the judge, and the lobbyists are representing their client's interests and trying to present the information, so basically you're going to rule in a way that's beneficial to their client.
Correct. And the lobbyists, you have paid lobbyists, and then you have lobbyists that aren't paid.
Do unpaid lobbyists get greater weight or credibility?
No, and the lobbyists that have a big staff that are able to do the research. For example, I was in a committee hearing, and a guy made reference to a document. I said, "Where's the document? I can't make a decision without the document." And he ran out of the committee hearing, called the staff, and before it was over, I had the document where some of the non-paid lobbyists don't have those type of resources for us to be.
And I guess it's rare if it's a significant issue being addressed by a bill that just one side's going to show up. All the interested players are going to show up.
Every interested player you can imagine would show up, and even when
that's really good news, Dan.
It is. It is good news in that they had many people that would appear before the committees, some of which I did not agree with, but that's the purpose. We get out there, we air it out, we listen to all the sides, and then we make the decision that we can, the best decision we can on the information we have. If nobody puts the information in front of us, how are we able to make an educated decision?
Because you can't be educated about every issue. You've got to become educated, and that's the role these folks play.
That is, and that touches on a good point. There were 1,200 bills filed, and so
1,200 bills.
1,200 bills filed, and
how long is the session?
45 days. But you have sometimes Fridays we didn't meet, and other days we didn't meet. So I was under the impression that my constituents were looking for me to read all those bills. Now, not every bill makes it out of committee. So a bill might be filed in the House side that never makes it out of committee. So there was no sense in me reading that bill.
Right.
In the beginning, I was reading every single bill, but then when I got a little bit
Gotta
smarter
be efficient, huh?
in the process and knew this bill's never going to make it over here, then there was no need for me to read those particular bills. But every bill that I voted on, I read.
Excellent. And the I guess the way it's passed through committee is a majority vote?
It is. Ordinarily, there's 7 members on the Senate side. I can't tell you how many
Right.
on the House side. And so you need 5 votes. And there's sometimes some gamesmanship involved that
well, majority would be 4, right?
Yeah.
But you need, all right. And so if you get 4 votes, it's going to pass out of committee.
Correct.
If you don't get those 4 votes, it dies.
Correct.
And if it doesn't get out of committee, is it a done deal? It's not going to be brought before the full Senate?
There's some parliamentarian, I don't want to call them tricks, maneuvers that can be used in that, where, for example, you have 7 people, you have a quorum, you have enough to make a decision, and a bill is coming up that somebody's opposed to, but he knows that he's not going to be able to kill it. Sometimes they have to go return a phone call or whatever, and you lose the quorum, and there's no ability to vote on that. So there's some maneuvering that goes on in these things. Where
and the quorum requires how many of the 7 members to show up?
You have to have 4.
Okay. Interesting. And as I understand the composition of the Senate right now, about 60% is Democrat, 40% roughly is Republican, about 20% minorities, and 20% women, 80% men. So are the committees stacked in those percentages, or how does that work?
Our Senate President, Joel Chasson, works very hard on making sure that all the committees are balanced. But
meaning what?
Balanced as far as Republican, Democrat, moderates, conservatives, in that he wants to make sure that it's representative of who's there.
Now he's the one who chooses which committee each senator is in? Essentially. He's got that sole kind of king authority, huh?
Essentially.
Wow.
And
that's some power.
It is some power, but we vote on who the Senate president's going to be, and so it's important that you pick a fair-minded fellow.
But the bottom line is, he's a Democrat, I assume, because 60% of the Senate's controlled by Democrats.
That's true, but in a sense it's not true, in that in the Senate side at least, I couldn't tell you the party affiliation of everybody that's in there. They have some guys that are Democrat that seem to be voting Republican. And so it's not really a Republican or Democrat thing on the Senate side. Right. It's what's good for Louisiana, what's good for their constituency.
So it's more pragmatic.
Much more.
And philosophical, probably.
And we don't have a seat where Republicans are there and the Democrats are here. We all sit together, and we don't get mixed up in that as far as I can tell. Now, certain basic philosophical differences are there, but the vast majority of the legislation doesn't hit those bellwether issues that people consider Republican and Democrat.
Very interesting. All right, so bottom line is you say that the system works.
It works on my side. On the House side, it appears to work over there, but I don't have the experience to be able to say that.
Excellent. It does. So a bill is then, let's say, passed, like your bill for this education reform was passed out of committee in a favorable vote, and then what happens?
Yeah, and it was unanimous, just for whatever that was worth. But passed is passed. And we took it over to the House side. It gets on their calendar. And they have much bigger committees where you're looking at 2 rows of people.
All right, let's continue this discussion on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Lines, and Dan Claitor, our Louisiana State Senator. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and again, pleased to have on the show Dan Claitor. He's a Louisiana State Senator, District 16. Dan, we were talking about the process of how a bill makes it through committee, and then it hits the Senate floor. Explain to the folks how that goes.
Okay. Once you've made it to committee, it's reported either favorably or doesn't make it off the docket from committee, and it goes to the Senate floor. You have a big, huge binder that has all the different bills that may come up that day and are subject to call or coming up that day. So when it comes to the floor, the senator that has the bill has to go down to the mic and discuss what it's about.
And you had to do that on 4 different occasions, huh? Or 3?
3. And so you go down to the mic and you make the discussion, but if you're watching it on TV, you go, how are these guys doing business? And that they're milling around and their discussions going on.
Doesn't look like they're paying attention.
Doesn't look like they're paying attention, but it's the same thing as lawyers of what we've done. We've done all our homework in advance. We've made our lobby, so to speak, with the other folks. And on most of the bills, the people are, I would guess, probably 75-80% sure on what they're going to do. And so only on the really controversial stuff of what's said at the mic really makes a difference to people, in that you've already discussed your bills with these folks. You have the discussion. You make sure there's opportunities for other people to talk about it, but the majority of the discussions is handled taken place in committee and with the folks beforehand. And so then you finish your discussion. You say you move to have the folks vote favorably, and they vote up or down. On that particular bill, education, I had thumbs up all around, and it passed unanimously. I had another bill that I had filed at the same time that was I had wanted to take money from the Louisiana Property Insurance Incentive Fund that wasn't used and making an endowment to LSU with that money, and it was millions of dollars, and I was naive enough to think that nobody else was going to see that money, but
want it for themselves.
Right. And so what happened is, as soon as the session started and I had a better feel for it, I understood that there was no way that that bill was going to go anywhere, that money was needed elsewhere in the budget, and so I just let that one sit on the calendar and never called it even in committee, and so it died. So you had the vote.
Well, let's talk about the other bills also that you brought up.
One for the Secretary of State, about hours of the Secretary of State's office, where we wanted to make uniformity there and ease of communication. Then this other one was the Louisiana Innovation Council, where there's a group called Blueprint Louisiana that does a lot of good things here in Louisiana. And the governor's office had already been considering a similar bill. And so the whole idea of this particular bill is Louisiana Innovation Council is that we're going to run out of oil and gas one day, and we're going to run out of these non-renewable resources, but you and I, our children and our grandchildren, are the renewable resource that we should have for a long time. So knowledge-based business is what this is about, and identifying it and getting it from the classroom and into practice, from the laboratory and into practice. And so that particular...
So it's an investment.
Investment in our children, our grandchildren, and our people.
It's interesting, too. It sounds like all of this stuff really takes place before the bill is even drafted. You've communicated oftentimes with the governor's office and fellow committee members, it sounds like. The committee process is really where the button heads, sounds like, takes place. Mm-hmm. By the time it gets to the Senate, it's done.
Almost. I mean, there's a whole lot of discussion in the Senate, and that it can be a fluke where everybody in committee was thinking one particular way and it passes out. And then when it gets out on the floor, you've learned other information, and it's a big hoorah.
So for your bills that did pass, what happens to them now?
Okay, so we go off the Senate floor, and then it goes over to the House committee. House committee has a lot more folks on it. You try to get one of the House members to sit with you at the table when you're making the presentation. You make the presentation.
So you've got to sell it again.
Sell it again, and the same people that were just constituents and lobbyists are selling it again or trying to kill it again in front of a whole new committee. And frankly, it makes it better frequently in that something that you missed on your side comes up, and there's an amendment made that makes it better. Now, there may be a huge difference of opinion over there, and one of the things that happens is sometimes somebody will hang an amendment on your bill that looks like, at first blush, it's a good amendment, but the whole idea is to kill your bill. And so they seem all
really
friendly about it in committee. They hang a amendment on it that sounds like a good deal, and then when it gets to the floor on their side, she's dead.
And so bottom line is, you need them, that is the House side, the representatives, as much as they need you for anything to make it all the way through. That's the bottom line.
It is, and sometimes there's a whole different philosophy between the two houses, and sometimes there's some gamesmanship involved in that. But by and large, I find everybody is working for the good of Louisiana.
And so then it goes to their committees. They hopefully vote on it favorably. You're involved in the process there. Educate everybody, hopefully. Then it goes on the floor
of the House.
And they vote on it.
They vote on it. It's a little different over there in that they stay at their desk and they have the mics and they have the discussion from wherever they are with whoever has brought the bill down at front. In the Senate, the people share the one podium, and they're kind of struggling over the same mic.
And then that bill has one more hurdle to clear, and that's the governor, right?
Correct.
Explain that.
Well, if it's more or less a governor's bill, you're feeling pretty good that it's going to pass. And two of mine, we worked with the governor a lot, so I felt that those are going to pass. But the one that you see the governor pull out his pen on a lot is dealing with the budget and line item. Vetoing it.
Saying, this ain't going through.
It ain't going. Not today, not on my watch. And so he does a fair amount of vetoing. He does a fair amount of signing. And then some he just allows to come into law without him signing it at all.
Let's talk about the big issue, frankly, that's facing the state right now, and that is, in the nation, and that is there's no money, or certainly less money in terms of tax revenue for the state to provide services for infrastructure, et cetera. How are we going to deal with that?
Well, there's going to be $1 billion shortfall, and there's no way around it.
$1 billion, as in B.
Oh, yeah, more than that, really. And it's a step function. Next year, it's going to be worse than it was this year, and the year after that, it should be even more terrible if it's possible. But
and why are we losing money?
Well, just like everybody else, when they're looking at their checkbook at the end of the month, they're not making as much money as they have in the past, and since they're not spending that money, we're not getting sales tax. We saw that on the automobiles. That's a big part of our sales tax. And so there's a common misconception that oil is going to save us by going up.
Because a lot of it, at least the impression is, a lot of our economy is based on the oil refineries.
And a lot is, but not as much as people believe. It's only 16-17% of the budget. So the oil's not going to save us. And when I filled up this morning, it was cheaper than it was 2 weeks ago. So so that's not going to do it.
So what do we do?
Well,
you got to cut some expenditures.
We do, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to figure out what are our priorities, and we put our priorities on this side, and we try to save these. The things that shouldn't be our priorities we put over here, or the things that should be done by private enterprise we put over here. And so we have the Streamlining Government Commission that's being headed by Jack Donahue, and they're trying to identify what are our priorities, what should other people be doing, and what should we not be doing at all.
Being proactive, it sounds like.
Yeah, and we've done this in government many times before. We all have high hopes that we're going to come to some real good decisions about it and make some real choices, but it may not be the case because everybody wants it cut, but they don't want it cut in their backyard.
Right. Let's talk about the federal health insurance issues are facing the nation right now, and from what I'm hearing, they're raising potentially the income level to around $29,000 for folks who would be eligible for Medicaid. Mm-hmm. Currently, we receive about 80% subsidies from the federal government. State has to pay 20%. If they raise that level, we're going in the hole to the tune of, I think, millions and billions of dollars.
That's true.
How do we deal with it?
And we have to deal with it, and that's an example of where we need state and federal coordination, and that our federal legislators are going to be driving the boat on that, but we're going to be feeling the impact. In the end,
so it's a process of education.
Process of education, and what the real problem is that Katrina artificially inflated our incomes.
Money, and we don't have that anymore. Dan, thank you so much for being on the show. This is Locke Meredith, Legal Line, State Senator Dan Claitor. Thank you for being with us.